It's interesting to think about how this approach, this idea of embracing competition, might play out in different industries.
Right? Like we've been talking about software. But would it work the same way in, say, biotech or clean energy?
That's a really good question. Those are fields where the research and development cycles are much longer and the regulatory hurdles are significant. So it's possible that investors in those areas might be less comfortable with backing multiple companies pursuing very similar approaches.
Makes sense. The stakes are higher, the timelines are longer, and the potential downsides of failure are greater. I could see how investors might be more cautious in those industries.
Exactly. In those fields, it might make more sense to focus on a smaller number of companies with truly differentiated approaches, rather than spreading resources across a wider field of competitors.
So the industry context really matters. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to fostering innovation.
Absolutely. And it's important for entrepreneurs to be aware of these nuances as they're building their businesses and seeking funding.
So if you're working in a field where competition is encouraged, like software, you might need to be prepared to move fast, iterate quickly, and constantly differentiate yourself from the pack. But if you're in a more capital-intensive industry with longer development cycles, you might need to focus more on building a solid foundation and demonstrating a clear path to profitability. Different game, different rules.
Exactly. It's all about understanding the rules of the game and playing to win.
And speaking of playing to win, I can't help but wonder if there's a psychological element to all of this.
Yeah.
Like, does having a competitor breathing down your neck actually make you work harder and smarter?
I think there's definitely something to that. There's a reason why athletes train against each other, why musicians compete in competitions, why academics strive to publish in prestigious journals. Healthy competition can be a powerful motivator. It forces you to push your limits, to think outside the box, to constantly strive for improvement.
You know, it's funny. I was reading about how even pigeons are more motivated when they're competing against each other. In one study, they found that pigeons who are racing against other pigeons flew significantly faster than pigeons who were just flying solo.
That's amazing. It seems like this drive to compete is deeply ingrained in many species, not just humans.
Right. It makes you wonder if YC is actually tapping into something fundamental about our nature, this innate desire to outperform our peers.
That's a really insightful observation. By creating an environment where startups are constantly challenged and compared to each other, they're essentially harnessing that primal instinct to be the best.
But here's where I start to get a little uneasy. If we're taking this idea of competition as a driver of innovation and applying it to, say, AI development,
Yeah.
where does that lead us? I mean, we're already seeing AI systems that can learn and adapt at an incredible pace.
And if we're intentionally pitting those systems against each other, encouraging them to constantly outdo one another, could we be inadvertently accelerating the development of AI in ways that we haven't even considered?
Exactly. What happens when these AI systems become so sophisticated, so autonomous, that they start setting their own goals, their own metrics for success?
It's a question that keeps me up at night, to be honest, because as much as I'm fascinated by the potential of AI, I also recognize that it's a technology that needs to be developed and deployed responsibly.
So how do we balance this drive for innovation, this embrace of competition, with the need for ethical considerations for safeguards,
Mm.
for some level of control over how AI evolves?
It's a tough question, and I don't think there are any easy answers. But I think it starts with acknowledging the potential risks, having open and honest conversations about the implications of AI development, and ensuring that we're building in ethical considerations from the very beginning.
And maybe it also requires us to rethink our assumptions about competition itself. Do we always need to frame it as a zero-sum game where there's a winner and a loser? Or can we find ways to foster a more collaborative approach to innovation where everyone benefits from the collective progress?
Those are great questions. I think we need to be exploring all of these angles as we move forward. We're in uncharted territory here, and we need to be thoughtful and deliberate in how we navigate this new landscape.
Absolutely. And as we delve deeper into this conversation about AI and the future of innovation, I think it's helpful to step back and remember that technology is ultimately a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right. It's up to us as a society to decide how we want to use these powerful tools, how we want to shape the future that we're creating.
And that brings us back to Y Combinator and their approach to fostering innovation. Are they simply playing the game as it exists, embracing the competitive dynamics of the tech world? Or are they, perhaps unwittingly, shaping those dynamics, influencing the very nature of innovation itself?
That's a profound question. And I think the answer is probably a bit of both. They're operating within a system, but they're also influencing that system in subtle but significant ways.
And it's those subtle influences, those seemingly small choices that investors and accelerators make that can ultimately have a ripple effect throughout the entire tech ecosystem.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future of technology, whether we're founders, investors, policymakers, or simply engaged citizens.
We can't just sit back and assume that progress will happen on its own or that the market will magically sort everything out. We need to be actively involved in shaping the direction of technology, ensuring that it aligns with our values and serves the best interests of humanity.
Well said. And I think that's a powerful message to send to our listeners.
Absolutely. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the ethical implications of AI development.
Yes, it's something we definitely need to explore further.
Because it's one thing to talk about competition and innovation in the abstract, but when we're talking about AI, we're talking about systems that could potentially impact millions, even billions of lives.
Right. The decisions that are being made today, the algorithms that are being developed, the data that's being collected, all of that will have a profound impact on the world that we're creating.
So how do we ensure that those decisions, those algorithms, that data, are being used ethically and responsibly? That's the question we'll tackle in our next segment. This whole conversation about YC and how they do things has really gotten me thinking about investors, and like their role in all this, like in shaping the future of technology. It seems like they have a ton of influence on which ideas get funded and then like which ones actually, make it to market.
Oh, for sure. It's true. Investors are like the gatekeepers. They're the ones who decide which companies get the resources they need to like grow and scale. And then their decisions can have a ripple effect, throughout the entire ecosystem.
So like, what if investors are mainly focused on just backing companies with similar ideas? Does that mean we're going to see less like diversity on originality in the tech landscape? It's easy to think that we'll just end up with everyone chasing the same trends, the same hot markets, and then we just kind of get this like monoculture of innovation.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. If everybody's chasing the same trends, it could lead to a homogenization of ideas, a lack of like truly groundbreaking innovation. We might end up with a lot of incremental improvements, but very few like truly disruptive breakthroughs.
And that could have implications like beyond just the tech industry.
Right.
I mean, if the same ideas are being replicated across different sectors, it could limit our ability to address, complex societal challenges in creative and effective ways.
Absolutely. We need diverse perspectives, unconventional approaches, and a willingness to experiment in order to solve these big problems facing humanity. If we're all stuck in the same narrow band of thinking, we're going to miss out on a lot of potential solutions.
So what can we do to encourage more diversity and originality in the tech world? How do we break out of this echo chamber and make sure that we're exploring a wider range of ideas?
Well, for starters, I think we need to broaden the pool of investors and entrepreneurs. Right now, the tech industry is still dominated by a relatively small group of people with similar backgrounds and experiences.
So more women, more people of color, more people from different socioeconomic backgrounds involved in shaping the future of technology.
Exactly. We need to create a more inclusive and representative ecosystem that reflects the diversity of our society. And that means actively supporting underrepresented founders and investors, providing them with access to the resources and networks they need to succeed.
And it also means challenging our own biases, being more intentional about seeking out diverse perspectives, and being willing to take risks on ideas that might seem unconventional or even a little bit crazy at first glance.
I couldn't agree more. We need to celebrate those who are taking risks, who are exploring uncharted territory, who are not afraid to fail. Because ultimately, it's those bold and unconventional ideas that have the potential to transform our world for the better.
It's like that old saying, the greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. We need to be aiming high, pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and not being afraid to challenge the status quo.
Well said. And I think that's a great note to end on. This has been a fascinating conversation about the role of competition diversity and investor influence in shaping the future of technology. I hope our listeners have found it as thought-provoking as I have.
I agree. It's been a real deep dive into some complex and important issues. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We encourage you to continue exploring these ideas and engaging in these conversations. The future of technology is in our hands, and it's up to all of us to shape it in a way that benefits all of humanity.
Wise words. And remember, the most important tool we have in shaping that future is our own curiosity, our willingness to ask questions, and our commitment to seeking out diverse perspectives.
So keep learning, keep questioning, keep diving deep.
Until next time.